Hi, I'm Gregory. I'm here with Jamie Smart, who's the #1 best-selling author of the book Clarity. It was a W.H. Smith's bestseller, I'll add that as well. And I think to date he sold probably 25,000 copies, maybe more. I'm sure he can correct me if I'm wrong. And what I want to do today is basically give you an insight into how Jamie's built his business and his own authority, and how he's used this position to basically build lots of other leaders in their industries and in the coaching industry. So you're not going to hear much from me. I'm going to ask Jamie loads of questions and you'll get a real insight into what he's up to. So Jamie, I don't know where we should begin, but really, I mean, I'm fascinated. I was a student of yours a long time ago. I think we've known each other about 13 years now, maybe a bit longer. You went from doing NLP and then you did something that seemed a lot more, to me, spiritual, and I was all about the content of, I loved NLP, and I loved all the stuff I was getting with it through sales copywriting and the stuff I was getting done. But then it became something that I would have probably seen as a bit wacky at the time, and I'm fascinated by this. So I followed you to see what you were up to. But how did that come about? What was the shift?
Well, and it's interesting given the subject that we're talking about, because I first got introduced to NLP in the late 90s, became fascinated with it, quit my job, started doing all kinds of stuff. And I didn't know anything about marketing or anything like that, but it was early days of the internet, like 2002, 2003. And when I started my NLP business, I thought, okay, I'll write a newsletter. And I remember before I created that business, someone asked me what I had to offer people. And I said, I'm just really enthusiastic about this stuff. I'm really into it. And they're kind of like, is that it? I'm like, yeah. But so I had this stuff that I was fascinated with, I was curious about, I was really enthusiastic about, and I learned it and shared it, learned it and shared it, and grew a community of people like that. And then you and I met, long time ago, and by about 2007, 2008, a lot of the things in my external things were going great. So my business was going great. I was, lots of passive income, working part-time and going and doing skiing and things like that. But I wasn't feeling fulfilled. I was feeling kind of off track in some way. And I thought, well, if this stuff I'd been doing was the answer to everything, and the thing is, I'd learned all kinds of cool things along the way, but if it was the answer to everything, I should be doing great by now. Yeah. I should be having a rich life on the inside as well as on the outside, and I wasn't. So I thought, well, something's wrong with this picture. So I went back to the drawing board. And what I discovered was that see, here's the thing, Joe. We don't interact with the world directly. We interact with our models, our ideas, our understanding of life. So everyone's got an understanding of life. It's what I call our grounding. So a little baby, when they're born, they've got very little understanding, and then as you go through life, your understanding increases. So, and I am going to answer the question, I promise. Okay. I'm just kind of taking the long way around. So if you think of something like gravity. Gravity's a fact of life. It's there, whether you believe in it or not or anything, and it's obvious. Like, you can't miss it. As soon as you're born, you're in gravity, and you're going to start learning about gravity. And so everyone who's watching and listening to this has a very, very good understanding of the fact of gravity. So good that you've used it 1,000 times this week without even thinking about it. Every time you walk up a flight of stairs or pick up a cup of tea, or you're using your embodied understanding of gravity. Well, we don't just have an embodied understanding of gravity. We have an embodied understanding of everything that we interact with in life. So we have an embodied understanding about money, about people, about relationships, about business, about books, about our work, about health, about the mind, we've got it about everything that's part of our life. And in some places in life, that understanding is really, really good. It's really well calibrated to life. Like with gravity, it's really well calibrated to life. In other areas, it's completely batshit crazy.
Yeah.
Like you might find someone who totally is very close to reality when it comes to relationships, but they're completely out of touch when it comes to health. Or they're very close to reality when it comes to creating business, but they're completely out of touch when it comes to relationships, or whatever it might be. So we all have our embodied understanding of life, and we got some places in life where it's very close to reality and other places where it's not so close. Well, the place where it seems, in my experience, the place where our embodied understanding of life tends to be off is in our understanding of how our minds work and where our experience comes from. And so I was confused about where my experience comes from. Even though I'd been spending years and years exploring the mind, my grounding was based on a fundamental misunderstanding about how our experience works. And it's, if I was going to sum up that misunderstanding, it's what I call the outside-in misunderstanding. It's the mistaken belief that we're feeling something other than the principle of thought taking form in the moment. And so how that often shows up for people is in the form of kind of, I'll be happy when I get this or change that. So how I had it, and I thought this was true, I kind of acted as though this were absolutely true. I'll be happy when and fulfilled and feel successful when I have X amount of passive income and time freedom, so I can do the stuff I want to do. And so I got to that point, and it was fantastic for about a week. And then I was like, huh. now it's me like I was 2 weeks ago, but with that thing sorted. And I realized that there must be something wrong with that. And I discovered that what it is it's a fundamental misunderstanding about how our minds work and how our lives work and where our experience comes from. And the interesting thing is, for this interview, it seems to me that anyone who wants to, like, I know we're going to be talking about the observable stuff, the stuff that you could point to. Any successful author who's created a book and got it out there and built a successful business, leveraged by that. I know that some of the stuff we're going to be looking at is the stuff you can see, the number of copies sold, or the marketing approach they've used, or the way they've designed their business model, that sort of thing. But all of that stuff is an expression of your grounding. It's an expression of your understanding of how life works. And so what's sometimes less evident is the stuff that had to happen for those things to happen. So in order to write a book that you believe in and that's a reflection of how you see life, that's authentic and engaging and all that stuff, you got to be in touch with your own creative process. You got to develop your creative muscle. You got to, now that's your creative process. Everyone's got one. Everyone, you might not like the word creative, but everyone is connected to a source of fresh new thinking, of creative ideas, of insight, of creativity and innovation. But a lot of times we haven't developed that muscle. Now, before I even understood the principles behind clarity, that was one of the areas where I'd built that muscle. Yeah. I'd written card decks and created products and that sort of thing. But here's the funny thing, when it came to getting products out there, I was nervous because I was very comfortable with earning money, working for, hourly rate and that sort of thing. But I wasn't comfortable putting stuff out into the world. So when I first started writing my newsletter, I was really freaked out because, like, I was going to send out my article, how I see it, to all my peers, and then they could criticize me and call me a no good shit and that sort of thing. Well, so that took some courage. What I find, a lot of people are afraid of being criticized. Yeah. They're afraid of being visible. Well, so that's going to take some courage. They say, well, I'll wait till I'm not afraid of it. Well, you might be waiting a long time, because in my experience, the quickest, easiest way to get over that is to just do it anyway. But then people go, oh, okay, well, I'll do it anyway once I got the confidence. Well, no, you may not want to wait for that either. You may just want to do it. So for whatever reason, Joe, that was an area where my grounding was closer to reality than in some other areas. So the thing is, you can't get courage by looking outside yourself for it. That one, you got to do it yourself. You got to grow your own. There's some stuff, like there's great stuff that I love reading, and I love watching videos, and I love going to talks and listening to people to pick up ideas and that sort of thing. And there's great stuff you can get by looking at how someone else has figured something out. So I don't want to minimize that. I think it's fantastic. I think it's great that other people have figured out how to cook certain meals, so I can go and open a Jamie Oliver cookbook and go, oh, that's how you make that, and I can try it out. So that's great. I really love books. I love that someone can take 5 or 10 or 20 or 50 years of experience and learning and insight and boil it down into 200 pages or whatever. I think that's incredible. And there's great stuff you can get from it. And there's stuff you got to grow yourself. And the stuff you've got to grow yourself includes your creative process. It includes your courage and your willingness to take action. It includes your leadership, your confidence and that sort of thing. That comes from inside you. That's the only place that ever comes from. You can't ever get it from anyone else. I know we'd all like to give it to people if we could, but it doesn't work that way. And so, now I'm going to answer your question. The reason for this change is I realized that I'd been looking outside of myself for some things that can only come from inside of you. Now, there's some things that can only come from outside of you. Butter. That you're going to find that in the fridge or the grocery store. Cars, they're best purchased. Pencils, there's some stuff that you can only find out here in the world of form. There's other stuff that you can only find from inside of yourself, and that includes courage, it includes security, it includes peace of mind, it includes love, it includes happiness and joy and well-being, it includes creativity, it includes authenticity and clarity and presence. These things can only be found on the inside. And so the reason I changed direction so suddenly and so dramatically is because I realized that that is by far the biggest leverage point for that I could share with people, because the thing that I see getting in people's way, and the thing I see getting in my own way, is the mistaken belief that a misunderstanding about where our experience comes from. So that's why I changed direction.
That's great. Thank you for answering that. My own view, I remember when I finally got a copy of your book, and I forget what page it's on, but you talk about upstream, and it made perfect sense, and it wasn't a sudden shift. You'd taken a path from sort of looking at the old psychological paradigm of how psychology was operating through the NLP, working with the content or the structure of the content, and it made perfect sense, and it was just an evolution of your own learning and your own grounding. That was the only next step. It wasn't actually a change of direction at all. It was just the next stage.
Well, I love that you put it that way, actually, because the stuff that I've always been fascinated with and drawn to and loved working with is how people work, how the mind works, how life works, and I love training and sharing ideas with people and helping create transformation. So that's all. What I've always been interested in is insight and transformation. How can I encourage that? Like, I remember when you came on practitioner training all those years ago, And I remember you'd been involved in NLP. I remember it was like it was yesterday. You'd been involved in NLP for a while, and then you came to a training course with me, and you said, "Oh, the pennies just dropped." Well, that was an insight. Now, at the time, I thought that insight came from my training or there, but no, it came from within you. So, for whatever reason, on that day in that course, you saw something from within you that got you a more profound glimpse of how life works. And I know since we've done other stuff together, you've had other insights, and so have I. Insights always come from within you, and insights, just another way of saying fresh new thinking. You know, what I'd most like for everyone who's watching and listening to this is that you have an insight while you're watching it, that you wake up to something fresh and new that's possible for you. And I'd love it if I could give you that, but I can't. That's going to come from inside of you, because that's the only place it ever comes from. And we're all wired for insight. We've been having them our whole lives. We all have. Anyone who goes, "Oh, I don't have insights," it's like, yeah, you do. Like that thought, "I don't have insights," that's thought. And that was once fresh and new, but now it's old and stale. But we all have insights.
You remind me, actually, going back to the practitioner, I remember that insight vividly as well. Because I remember I was fixated on learning all of the techniques. I had a kind of a mental checklist. And something that you said just made me think, I don't need any of the techniques. It's all about the experience. I mean, it was very close to what you were doing now. I mean, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
It just wasn't being spoken about in these terms.
Well, yeah. I mean, because at the time, I was still in a misunderstanding. I hadn't seen this paradigm. I mean, the principles behind clarity. By paradigm, I mean something very specific. I mean, in the terms of scientific revolutions, like there was a time when people didn't know about germs and bacteria. And so the field of medicine was all over the shop. And then a guy called Ignaz Semmelweis had this insight into, oh, there's tiny invisible creatures on people's hands and on instruments. And that ushered in a new paradigm for medicine and for health, and the lifespans of the average lifespan of everyone on the planet has increased by 30 years as a result of antiseptic procedures and a deeper understanding of the principles behind health and well-being and illness and disease. Well, the field of psychology has been laboring under a misunderstanding, just like the field of medicine was. And in the 1970s, a guy called Sydney Banks had an insight into the nature of psychology. And that's what I got introduced to, 6 years ago, when I started exploring. So this guy, Sid Banks, was the Semmelweis of psychology, and he is the one who uncovered the principles behind clarity. And that paradigm, it really is a paradigm. As what I find is that as people start to see through that, to see the truth of it, they see through the misunderstanding, their lives just unfold in the most wonderful way. And now here's the interesting thing, Joe. Back when I was doing NLP and I was passionate about it, enthusiasm, people used to sometimes say to me, "You ought to write a book." And I never did, because I kind of felt, that's not the book I want to write. It just didn't feel right. And then at a certain point, I guess it was probably 2011, my understanding of this stuff was such that it's like, now I want to write the book. Yeah. So I think that writing a book can be great for business and all that stuff. And I also think it's worth people finding something that's true for, what's true for you. What would you love to write about? What would you love to share with people? What's making a huge difference to you and in your life? Because I totally get that the purpose of this program is to encourage people to write books, and anyone who's got something profound and impactful that they can share with people, something you're already seeing that's making the difference in the lives of your clients, great, go and do it. And I want you to write a book that, I want people to write a book that's I want them to write a great book. Yeah. Now that may involve writing some rubbish chapters and then going through the editing process and that sort of thing. But I you know, there's go ahead,
I was going to ask about the editing process, because I regularly share this with people, because we have a step which is called test. I remember vividly that you allowed people into the creative process.
Oh, yeah.
How scary would it have been? So going back to the idea of courage, to say, right, I'm opening it up before I've had any sort of filter on it. Yeah. But I mean, how useful was that in actually crafting the book that eventually emerged?
Well, so I did. I basically sent out chapters every week. Thousands of people read it. Hundreds of people gave feedback on it. I'm going to sound like a bad man for this. I used those interactions as opportunities to engage with my audience and help people deepen their understanding. Here's what I didn't do. I didn't go, oh, Bob doesn't like this bit, so I'll change the word. I trusted that anything that I was, like, the stuff that found its way into the book, I'd been teaching and learning from people's response the whole time, and then I just trust whatever gets written down. So I used that as another another opportunity to do that. But I didn't use people's comments as a one-to-one editing process, because that would be, that doesn't, I'm very internally referenced when it comes to writing. Like I'm gonna write what makes sense to me. And so then when I went to the publishers and said, okay, here's the book. So well, I'll tell you something about it. So I had an initial meeting with an editor, commissioning editor for Wiley's. And we sat down and had a conversation, and I had made a book proposal, and they said, well, we like what you're pointing to, and we like your platform and that sort of thing. But we're gonna need a new introduction, and we're going to need a proposal that covers these points and that sort of thing. So I asked her two questions. One was, what are the best book proposals you've received? And she sent me copies of those, and I went through them and went, okay. So I got a sense of how they like to receive a book proposal, so that was useful. And I asked her what was the best introduction to a book she'd ever read, and she told me, and I read that. And I got inspired by that as well. It's like, oh, okay, I get, because my introduction, which I'd read what I felt like, right? But I understood that actually I didn't really know what an introduction was for. So I learned about that. But then I wrote from the heart. I wrote what made sense to me. When she came back, she said, that's one of the best introductions I've ever read. I went, well, good. Well, but then in part, it was because I knew what they were looking for, because they know their market very well. They know that, you know, a lot of the books that, a lot of the copies that got of Clarity that got sold by virtue of the fact that it was #1 in Smiths. #1 in Smiths outsells everything else by 10 to 1 or something. It's a really big differential. Well, Wiley know their readers very, very well. Now I know my community very, very well, so I wanted to create a book that speaks to my community and that also would embrace Wiley's wider community. I wanted to write a business-friendly book about something that people might perceive as being quite woo-woo or out there. I wanted to take this and express it in very practical, down-to-earth terms that people could relate to. So I wanted to make it very business-friendly, which is, you know, Smith's market for this kind of book.
I find it interesting that Wiley was the publisher you chose, not without. I love Hay House, but I would have said the natural home for that kind of book would be Hay House.
Yeah, well, that was a very specific decision.
Yeah.
The thing about the stuff I'm pointing to, people will sometimes hear me talk or something and say, "Oh, is that the same as you know, this new age thing or that?" And I'm like, no, it's something very, very distinct. Well, if Clarity had been launched in the mind, body, spirit world, it would have seemed quite similar to other stuff. And yet what I'm suggesting is that there's a very, very hard line distinction, a discriminator between this and all the other stuff. The business world, it hasn't really seen anything like that. So that's where I wanted it. I wanted it to be in that blue ocean of the business rather of the business world.
This perfectly matches me. I've occasionally sort of ranted about the fact that I never used to like going to self-development seminars because I always had coaches coming out of the woodwork to coach me. And so
hold still while I coach you.
And I do think, you know, a lot of the coaching stuff out there, they're already, in the past I would have said they're out of their minds. Now I know actually they were probably on a, you know, whether you call it state of mind or level of consciousness, they were actually on a higher level of consciousness anyway. So to them it wasn't anything shocking or sort of new or out there. But in the world of business and my world where it was, you know, I like it to be quite rational and structured and thought based, I found your book probably was quite one of the most shocking business books you could get, you know, and it opened by saying, you know, most people that say paradigms are using it as a marketing tool. Yeah, this really is a paradigm shift, and it kind of gave it that extra level of sort of credibility. If you can convince your hardest, I mean, you would have definitely got people on the mind, body, and spirit going, yeah, I've known that for years. That's how I operate.
But they would have been talking about something else. Yeah. So, oh yeah, I know what you mean. It's like, you know, I'm not sure that you.
But that was to me. I found that I talk about something called attitude on the webinar, and it felt like you were doing something very, very different to anything else on the subject of sort of success and getting things done. You weren't going through the list of external stuff. And one of the distinctions in your book, I think it's acting it versus catching it. Yeah. I found that was probably one of the most useful ones to actually say, well, what does that mean, actually catching it? So
do you want me to talk about that? Yeah. Well, the metaphor you're referring to is we've all, I'm guessing we've all pretended to have a cold. At one time or another, to you know, calling. Oh, I'm really sick. Or I have anyway. It doesn't cut it so well now that I'm the boss, but I don't convince myself like that. But if you're pretending to have a cold, it's kind of difficult to fake the symptoms. It's tough to fake a runny nose or that sort of thing. But if you actually catch a cold, well, all that stuff emerges effortlessly. Well, what I've found is that most books on success, personal development, motivation, all that sort of stuff, they're teaching people the symptoms of leadership, the symptoms of living with purpose, the symptoms of how to, you know, be successful in some area. And so the question I wanted to answer is, how do you catch that? Rather than trying to fake the symptoms, how do you catch the cold that has the symptoms emerge effortlessly? I mean, it's sort of an upside down metaphor. So how do you catch the leadership bug? How do you catch the authority bug? How do you catch the creativity bug? How do you catch the innovation bug? How do you catch the confidence bug? Well, here's the cool thing, Joe. You don't catch it. You clear up a misunderstanding and you discover that you've already got it. That's the cool thing. What I can tell everyone here is you already have the source of confidence, authority, clarity, peace, happiness, creativity, leadership, resilience, motivation. You already have that within you. It's already there within you. And the only thing that ever gets in the way of it is a simple misunderstanding of where your experience is coming from. You clear up that misunderstanding, and more and more and more of that, which really is, in my opinion, that list of stuff I just made, that's the power source behind authority and credibility and that sort of thing. You clear up that misunderstanding and all that stuff's going to start to emerge.
I'd say that's a really important point, because we talk about the 5 A's on the webinar. They are actually only showing you the evidence that can be seen, but something still has to go on within, and that's kind of the thing for all the people that are taking this process and going through this process, that's kind of assumed that it's already there, because I know it's already there. After being trained for a long time with Jamie, I know it's already there too. So it's about actually clearing the way to allow that, and actually having some pointers on the way while you sort of find your feet. That's really helpful. So I suppose the other thing I'm interested in, I don't know if this is the exact words, I'm paraphrasing, but you like to have something for everybody. You're aware that some of the programs that you run are very, very high level and expensive, they're a big investment. And so there's a way...
big expensive investment.
Yeah, or a big huge... Well, well, I mean, that you kind of, people can interact with this stuff and engage with this stuff. There's loads of stuff that you do for free.
Yeah.
And I talk about that as authorship, but you put out loads of videos. You've got a newsletter again. JST, is it?
The Jamie Smart tip, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, how did that come about? Was that an organic thing, or did you actually have a mind to grow something so you made sure you didn't leave people out if they weren't necessarily in the right position financially to?
Yeah, no, it's always been that I want people to get this stuff. I want, and this goes right back to the first newsletter I wrote in 2003. I want people, I want people to be able to access what I do and to experience what I do and to benefit from what I do, no matter how much money they've got or don't have, no matter how much time they have or don't have. So if someone wants to invest, it seems to me, there's a quote that I open the book with, actually, from a guy called, I can't remember his name, but I remember the quote. He said, what information consumes is rather obvious. Information consumes attention. And it seems to me that the most valuable commodity in the world, the most valuable thing that people have, is their attention. And we live in a world where more and more people and more companies and more pieces of content are vying for that attention. And so anytime someone's willing to give their attention to what I'm doing, that has value for me, and so I want it to have value for them too. And so I want to create ways of people spending time with me, spending attention on me, and if some of that translates into financial transactions, well, that's terrific. And I can promise you that the vast majority, like the 95%, 98% of the people who get value from what I do don't pay for it with anything other than their attention. They don't pay for it financially. They pay for it with their time. They pay for it with their attention. So I've got videos that have been seen by 400,000 people. I did a video years ago, 7-minute video, 450,000 people or something have watched it. That's that's amazing. That's like 3.5 million minutes of people's lives. That's an incredible amount of attention that's being paid to that. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. 25,000, 30,000 people have bought the book Clarity so far, and at least look to the front of the back cover. Some of them have read it though, and that's an incredible amount of attention. People watch videos, they listen to audios, they listen to podcasts. Well, whenever they're doing that, they're building a relationship with me and my work and what I'm passionate about. They're building that in their minds. And so I'm very grateful for that, and I want to facilitate that. And I want to facilitate them. The thing I most want is for them to have insights into who they really are and their own power. The reason I do what I do and the reason I'm passionate about sharing this and all of that is because I see an understanding of the principles behind clarity as being the future of our species. everyone, our lifespan's been increased by 3 decades because of understanding germs and bacteria. Understanding how our psychology works is the solution to the biggest problems we face, including war and terrorism, including pillaging the environment and violence and crime and mental illness, and so many things are going to get sorted out by this. So that's why I'm doing it. It's just like, this is it's just an incredible time to be alive.
You reminded me of something else, because obviously I went through the process of the clarity practitioner with you. And I remember reading something in your book about real leaders don't have followers, they create more leaders. I can't remember the exact quote.
Yeah, that is the exact quote.
I don't know who it was by, I don't remember things.
I think it was Ralph Nader.
Right, well, that to me was sort of, I saw it actually, I experienced the way you were creating that with the practitioner course, and I know now there are loads of practitioners out there sort of working in a similar way with this understanding, and having great effects, in all sorts of areas of life. So I imagine that was definitely part of the plan. That was an intentional.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, because the way I saw it is that when I first started getting this understanding of the principles behind clarity, I was like, oh no, if this breaks in a big way, if someone gets on Oprah with this or something like that, there's going to be huge demand, and there's hardly anyone there to fulfill it at the moment. And so this is going back to 2009 and 2010, I started talking about this and building a community and that sort of thing. And at first I was kind of a lone nutter kind of thing. When I was first posting videos about it, it's like, oh, I know I'm going to sound a bit mad, but when, last year when Clarity came out, so it was at #1. I remember when Michael Neal's book, which is also about these principles, came out. So Clarity and Inside Out Revolution were both in the top 10 of Smith's at the same time. It's like, oh wow, that's real different from 4 years previously. And so it's building. There's interest in this, and there's more and more people coming to it and seeing the truth of it. So that's, that's part of, I see part of my purpose, part of what I'm here for, is to help get this understanding out into the world and to help other people do it. That just seems the most leveraged way to do it to me, is get it so other people can share this and have an impact and spread it.
And I want to sort of make this point, because I see this a lot. So some people are scared of sharing what they've got, even in a book, because they realise that the cover price of a book is 15 quid or 20 quid if they can think they can get away with that sort of price, and they think, I'm giving away all of this stuff. And you mentioned that earlier about people giving sort of 10, 20 years of experience away. But actually that isn't actually that's only the story of the experience anyway in a book. But what I've kind of seen, the great thing about what you've been doing by creating more leaders is it doesn't diminish your leadership. It enhances it. You all go up together.
It's so interesting you say that, Joe. For whatever reason, ever since I started writing my newsletter back in 2003, my assumption has been, well, if I give my coolest ideas away, because the only thing you can write down is an idea, as a concept or whatever. If I give my best stuff away, some people are going to want to come and have a more direct experience of it with me. And so I've never been precious about sharing ideas, concepts, and that sort of thing, because the power is actually in where do they come from. That's where the power is. And so, it just never, I mean, I don't want to tell anyone what to do or what not to do, but it never makes sense to me to be insecure about
to hoard your
it's like, no, because think about it, you got all your ideas and whatnot. Well, there's more where that came from. Just make space. And so you make space by giving it away, and the people who want to get closer to the source, well, they'll come along. So that just always made sense to me, to give your best stuff away.
I love it when people say that, because it's, it is a big fear for a lot of people. The reason that the program's called Book Bring Business is because people are like, well, if I give all the stuff away in my book, I'm going to lose business. And so we had to literally say, no, you know, I had to
that's
make a very
just
clear
not
statement.
true.
It doesn't work that way.
But I think the other piece that goes along with that is the more authentic and grounded in reality and impactful what you're sharing is, the more that what you've just said is going to be true.
Yeah.
If what you got isn't that great, if it's a bit rubbish and it's not going to, like, you know, in Cosmo magazine, I guess every month there's the top 10 tips for getting a six-pack, finding a man, living a happy life. You know how they're on every issue, and every issue of Men's Fitness, and you read them and they're obvious. You're like, oh yeah, of course, and then you don't implement them, and then you buy the same issue the next month. Well, the reason that they do them every month is A, because they're shiny. Our conscious mind loves positive advice. Tell me what to do. Look outside for the answer. A, they're shiny, and B, they're worthless. They don't have any power. The only power comes from within you. So the thing is, if what you've got to share is something that's not worth that much, people will read it, it'll have no lasting value, and then it won't build your business. So I encourage people, share something that's really good. Like, and I know people get insecure about, is it good enough for that? But I don't mean good like that. I mean good like something that you can hang your hat on, something that you're like, I believe in this. This is how I see it to the best. So be yourself, be you, be real. Like the word author, it points to the roots around authority, but also to me points to the roots about authenticity. Be real, be you, and share something that you can hang your hat on, that you can stand behind and go, this really matters to me. Like I sometimes read books that someone's written as a marketing tool, and I'm like, you've just wasted some of my life by having me read some I read some, and I know as people hear this, they're going to get up in their heads about, oh, is it good enough? And I don't mean that. I mean something that's real, something that's an expression of who you really are, something that needs to be written down, something and if you haven't found that yet, find it. And if that's not what you're doing in your business, if you're not doing something that you're proud of and that you believe in, and don't write a book about it. We don't need that book. We need a book that's coming from who you really are and what you've got to give to the world, and something, because the world doesn't just need more books. The world needs more awesome books. So
and it needs more. I mean, I talk about people that I'm working with as entrepreneurs with a message. And that is a fully embodied message about what they're doing and how they're operating. And I feel a lot of people are now doing the book as a checklist sort of operation. Like, yeah, I've got the book. Now I'm going to force it to be a bestseller. You know, in some way, even if I have to call it a bestseller because I got in the category for cat care, or some level down. I mean, this is true, and I actually know of books that have been claimed to be bestsellers that have sold like 11 copies to get that status because it was in such a low-level category on Amazon that Amazon stick the tag on. I mean, they're not lying. But it's not really a bestseller, Not many people have given it attention. You'd have been better off giving 10 copies away. So I really like that. And I think that comes back to the fact that if you are going to write a book, it's not an easy process. I mean, your book is packed, and this kind of sounds a bit fanboy-y, but I don't read many books more than once. I kind of read them, get the info out, and then I kind of see them as disposable. I shouldn't say that as a publisher, but I kind of, that's how I'm going through, because I haven't got time to keep carrying all the books with me that I may need to refer to. And I've now read your book. I'm halfway through the third read. And what I found, so the first time I read it, I'll be honest with you, I was really frustrated because I missed the point on page 7 where you said don't read for understanding. So I spent the whole book going, well, I don't understand this, or I kind of understand that, and I was sort of doing a tally of how many things I missed. And then the second time I was reading it was when I was going through the Clarity program, and it helped to sort of facilitate some insights. You know, I had a particular issue about trusting. It was about the connection, the connected nature of how we all connect. I'm not buying that. There's some people I really hate, and so I don't want to feel connected to them. And then I realised it was just like gravity. Actually, you are whether you believe it or not. It's still the case. And I know revisiting the book, I found stuff there. And on this third read through, I'm actually finding. I mean, maybe this is part of the process anyway, but I'm kind of agreeing with some of it. But I spend most of the time just smiling, going, and thinking of all the other people that have read this.
Yeah.
And how many other people now are potentially in my community. I mean, I see, I'm based over in Norfolk. I see loads of people in Norwich talking in these terms. And I was on Sunday, I was at one of our author's book launches. The event she put together for her book, she had psychiatrists and psychologists, you know, working within London in the NHS at high level, talking in terms about, you know, it's inside and you can see yourself in other people. And I was thinking, oh wow, you know, how close is this wave of understanding from being sort of, you know, actually the new paradigm, rather than it being a sort of an out there weird sort of fringe of psychiatry and psychology.
Well, here's the cool thing, Joe. The thing with pointing to facts of life is they're how it already works, whether you believe it or not. Yeah. So it's like the back when they didn't know that the Earth went round the sun, they thought the sun went round the Earth. But the Earth was going around the sun the whole time that they thought it was working the other way around. So it already works that way, whether you believe it or not. So I remember reading a quote by Byron Katie once. She said, if you ever see someone in a fight with reality, put your money on reality. And I kind of feel like that. So I think this wave, it really is close. It's building. I mean, even over the past few years, it's built incredibly.
Yeah. It kind of feels inevitable now. I don't know whether it was just where I was at with stuff, but I was thinking there seemed to be more and more nutters popping up, talking about this stuff that I don't really get. And actually, it was evidence of something that's I now find really exciting and sort of, wow, you know, we are at a sort of a new point. And I suppose it depends where you are on the wave. Some people will. I think you like the bell curve sort of thing. You use the bell curve quite regularly just to illustrate a point, just as a metaphor. But I think a lot of people will end up in the sort of wake of the wave, thinking, what the hell's going on? So I mean, from my point of view, I think the more people that are out there talking about this stuff and writing books about this stuff and connecting with them, even if people are saying, well, I'm depressed or whatever, even if that's where they start the conversation, to actually let them see this inside out nature of how things are really happening. That to me would be a really exciting development, you know, in the future. But again, you don't want surface books that just sort of talk about it. It's got to be their embodied version of it. Like, it can't just be the next Clarity or the next Inside Out revolution. Well,
and whoever, you know, I know there are going to be people watching this who the book that they're writing isn't even about this stuff. It's about something completely different. But as long as it's something that you care about and you believe in, and that is real for you, that's what matters. There's a book I read called Anti-Fragile. Not everyone's cup of tea, but I loved it. Now, he's not talking about the stuff I'm talking about, but he's talking all about, you know, probability and prediction and that sort of thing. But it's so authentic and so well written, and so that I just loved it. So it was a pleasure to read, a pleasure to give my attention to. I'm looking forward to reading it again. It's so that's I want to read good books.
Yeah, I think that's great with books, because one of the good things about a book is if you don't agree with all of it initially, I mean, or ever. And I think a lot of people write a book thinking I don't want to offend this group, and I've got to make sure I give a balanced view of this. And I kind of think, in terms of authority, that going back to what you were saying about it being real and authentic, you should just give your opinions.
I like so Clarity, and I love that you're reading it for the third time. That's so cool. it's a Marmite book. Like on Amazon, there's loads of 5-star reviews of it, but there's 10% of the reviews are 1 star. This book is rubbish. Well, what? That's good. I like that. I'm like, great. That's good. I would much rather have a bunch of 5-star reviews and a bunch of 1-star reviews than all of them be 2, 3, 4 stars or 3-star reviews. I'd much rather have that kind of polarization. And the reason is, and a lot of times I'll have people saying what you said, which is, yeah, the first time I read it, didn't understand it, it was frustrating, and so I put it down, and then 6 months later, I thought, you know what, I'm going to go back to it. And when I went back to it, I discovered that a lot of what I'd read from the first time was already showing up in my life, and I hadn't even realized it. And they all made perfect sense. How does that happen? Well, that's the thing about reading about principles, about facts of life, rather than ideas and concepts and beliefs and stuff. So I think it's great to have something that's polarized, that's Marmite. I mean, when I first launched my website, the banners were saying, what did it say? Self-help isn't selfing. No, self-help isn't helping. Personal development is broken. Psychology isn't working. Very Marmite statements.
Very well, sort of antagonistic to
very antagonistic, because I'm very happy for a bunch of people to go, I don't like that. I'm very in favor of that. Like I'm not deliberately trying to seek that out, but I'm not watering anything down to stop that happening. I know people are going to be divided in their opinions about this, so I'm happy with that.
Fantastic. Right, so I mean, the last thing that I'd like to know is, what impact did actually writing the book have on you from the point of view of organising what you'd already sort of brought together? Did you find it a useful experience for making all that intangible stuff you've got and the formless stuff? Is it nice to have a sort of an artifact that you can go, look, read this,
it's great.
I don't have to turn up. And
it's great. It's great for a bunch of reasons. I mean, the discipline of going through the process and working with editors and that sort of thing, that was good. It's hard work. I mean, I've never calculated the hourly rate I got for it, but there's a certain degree to which it's a labor of love and that sort of thing. But that was enjoyable. I really liked the creative process of doing that, and that was cool. And also, writing it as a book structured my thinking, and it developed my thinking. So it wasn't just a matter of recording a bunch of thoughts. The process of creating the book actually developed my thinking to a new level. It deepened my understanding. So the process of writing the book was a learning process for me as well, not just about the process of writing, but I understood what I'm sharing better by the time I got to the end of writing the book than I had at the beginning. But also, it gave me a kind of a way of organizing my market message and my business and that sort of thing around the book. So while my website is jamiesmart.com, but actually Clarity is itself a brand and an entity in its own right. So as I'm training Clarity practitioners and Clarity coaches, it feels like Clarity is something that's bigger than me. So whereas Jamie Smart, the brand, that's me and my marketing message, Clarity is something that a community is sharing in. And so I really like that. Now that's not everyone is gonna want to do that with their book or their brand. But for what I'm trying to create, which is supporting a movement and a groundswell and a wave and all that sort of stuff, that's really great
and
as
it becomes
well.
an accessible rallying point around everything else, because it's affordable for everybody. And it's full of all the information that I did on the practitioner. I hope you don't mind me saying this. is pretty much covered in the book.
Oh yeah.
But it's as I say, it's still. You make the distinction between tangible and real.
Yeah.
The book is a tangible expression of the stuff, but the real expression is actually experiencing it.
Yeah.
And you can't get that in a book.
No.
As much as it would be really nice, you can do the best you can to elicit those responses and those insights, but it's still just a book about.
Well, here's the funny thing. So you can have people who read the book and are profoundly impacted. So I had a couple, they read the book, and I can't remember which way around it was, but either the wife came home and the husband had been up all night reading it, or vice versa, and then the other one read it. And then they quit their jobs, sold their house, and moved, and they're living a completely different lifestyle and loving it now. So the power isn't in the book, and to be fair, the power isn't in the training program. The power's inside of you. So some people, you know, bell curve, some people read the book, it was like, what a load of nonsense, I already know that, and had no impact. Well, they were looking in the book for the power when the power's inside of you. The other end of the spectrum, you have those people who read the book and changed their entire, or Daniel Sturridge scored his first hat trick in the Premier League, walks into his post-match interview holding a copy of Clarity. So like there's articles in the paper about it, Daniel Sturridge has got Clarity. He says, I don't feel pressure anymore. He's like, so he read I've not worked with him personally, he read the book and had an insight into where his best performance comes from.
Money.
Or a testimonial for the next one. But that's, the power's inside you. So the power isn't in the book, the power isn't in the training course, the power is inside you. But the purpose of the book, the purpose of the training, the purpose of my coaching with people is to create a space where the power that's already there can emerge. And that's what happens for people. So yeah, and it kind of ties back to what we were saying about giving away your best content and that sort of thing. When it comes to transformation, the power's in the person, and your job is to facilitate that. And a book's a great way of doing that. And you know, that it's a great way of doing that.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, here's what I'd say to anyone who wants to do what you've just said, to put themselves and what they offer, you know, entrepreneurs with a message, or put yourself. I think your biggest leverage point, you know, I run this taster event where I ask people a question, which is, what's the #1 goal you could achieve, or change you could make, or problem you could solve that you perceive would have the biggest positive impact in your life? And people come up with all sorts of answers, ranging from very material things like money, or publishing a book, or you know, getting the right relationship or whatever, to very internal things like self-belief or confidence and that sort of thing. And so we go through kind of unpacking that and what's behind it. But it turns out that it's actually a trick question, because the ultimate leverage point, the most like if we were to ask people back in the 1820s, what's the biggest thing you could do that would have the biggest positive impact in your physical health, they would have said, you know, everlasting posies, or you know, creating a London that doesn't have any bad smells in it, or that sort of thing. But it turns out that the ultimate leverage point was a better understanding of germs and bacteria. But that wasn't even on their radar screen. So it seems to me that speaking to you as an entrepreneur, as an author, as a leader, your ultimate leverage point is your embodied understanding of the inside-out nature of life. You get a better understanding of the principles behind clarity. You get a better understanding of how life works, and it's going to have a profound impact on everything you do. So I think that's just true for everybody. So yeah, that would be the message I want to leave people with.
Thanks, Jamie. Cheers.
Thank you.